I'm joined by a very special friend to Liberty University, to all of us at the Standing for Freedom Center, and a personal friend to me, Sam Sorbo.
So great to be here with you. It's
Great.
so great to see you. It's funny, we sort of bounce off each other at these things.
That's right.
But it's always so great.
There's always, yes. So you were on campus at Liberty University a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
You were the MC.
Yes.
For the national.
And you were like passing through, and I was like,
right.
Hi.
Yes, exactly. But what a great event that was.
Yes.
National Association of Christian Lawmakers. There's a lot of things that they're doing nationally, state by state by state.
Yes.
On legislation.
Right.
And it's growing. Like
they are growing because I was there 4 years ago.
Yes.
And it was less than half the size, I would say.
Yes.
And it's a very important work that they're doing.
They've had several model bills. I think like the heartbeat bill.
Yep.
There's several others that have come. They've had some transgender bills that have come out. So they've done several things. And then what's happening is, like, say if it goes to Alabama or Texas, other states are looking at it and saying, hey, we want that here in Florida.
In our state.
Yeah, wherever.
And so then they can modify it slightly for their state, because
Yes.
sometimes you need those modifications depending on the constitution of that state.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's really organized.
Yeah.
It's great because it's really a resource for these people.
Yes.
I think people don't necessarily understand how somebody gets elected to office and then performs.
Right.
Right? And so for me, it's eye-opening also. Because a lot of people, they get elected to office because they've got to be in their bonnet. They ran for office, and then they're there, and they've got all their aides telling them what to do and where to go and who to talk to and stuff like that. And this is just another resource that I think is really bona fide.
Yeah.
And Jason Rappert, who puts the whole thing on, it's his baby. It's really an amazing work that he's done.
Yes.
So.
And he can play the fiddle, too. I don't know if anybody knows that, but that's a pretty cool trick. I love that. Okay, but we're not here to talk about Jason Rappert or National Association of Christian Lawmakers, as important as they are. We're here to talk about an organization you're actually representing, Parents Demanding Justice Alliance. A few months ago, we were at the Museum of the Bible, and we had an event where we had Loudoun County parents come who were targeted by the former Department of Justice, by Merrick Garland. These people were called, God bless them. They were doing the work of the Lord. They were trying to protect children. They were sounding the alarm. This is back in 2021, 2022. But they were essentially called terrorists, domestic terrorists.
Domestic terrorists was the word that was used. Those were the words that were used.
It's completely offensive. Every American, I don't care what political stripe you are, ought to be offended by that.
Yes.
These are parents that were actually doing their due diligence, and they were not coming with physical violence. They were coming in the name of protests, but they were doing it in a very organized way.
Well, let's face it. We've been cowed by our schools.
Yes.
We've been trained for 13 years in grade school and upper level, right, to obey.
Yes.
And to follow the teachers and to do what the teachers say. And so it's very difficult for a parent to stand up at a school board meeting and say, I think this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they were doing. And it was like, I think this is wrong. This is wrong to me. There are other people here who also think this is wrong. We should take this out of the schools. So they were talking about pornography.
Yeah.
But it started under COVID. It started with the draconian mask policies. And so my partner in this is Kelly Walker. He's a father of 5. And he stood at a city council meeting where he was invited to speak to talk about the mask policies because he had a cafe, and people were coming to his cafe for respite because he wasn't enforcing these draconian measures.
Right.
He didn't see the point. It wasn't illegal for him not to enforce them. It was perfectly legal. And so they asked him to come and speak because kids were committing suicide.
Wow.
Okay? And parents were afraid for their children and stuff. And he went to speak, and they arrested him. And there was a lot more to the story. But he was fined. He was sentenced to days in prison, in jail. They just went after him. They actually managed to shut down his business. They sicked the media on him. And he's not alone. He is just representative of so many of these stories. There's a lawyer that we represent. the school board called the law office and said, you need to fire this man or we will withdraw our contracts with your law office. And that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
At the very least, that's inappropriate.
Absolutely.
But we're just demanding restitution. We're not talking about compensation per se. We're talking about restoring these people to where they were. So Kelly is struggling because it's hard to get a job when you have an arrest on your record, and nothing came of the arrest, by the way. It should be expunged, but they haven't yet. They just haven't gotten around to it.
Insane.
So, and this lawyer, he did find another job, but he lost a lot in pay because he had to go find another job. So these people have been unduly harmed by their government, and that's not the whole story. Because there's the second half of the story. We talked about the parents who were like, I think this is wrong. I'm not really sure, but this probably shouldn't happen, right? There are tons more parents who haven't spoken because they saw this other stuff going on.
Right.
So this was a campaign of intimidation by our government.
Absolutely, 100%
right?
it was.
So
yes.
it's a much bigger picture.
Yep.
And we need to turn that around. And the reason that I say we need to turn that around is test scores are plummeting.
Right.
Our schools can't get the academics done.
No.
They've stopped doing the academics. Now they're doing LGBT and trans ideology and all this other stuff.
Right.
And they're not even attempting academics. Why? Because you can't teach academics without character. The number one predictor for academic success for a child is parental involvement. So when a school positions itself against parents being involved, you parents butt out. That school is not interested in the academic success of that child.
Right.
That's a problem for them.
Yes.
And so we need to turn this around. We need to make it cool to be a parent again.
Yeah.
We need to invite parents into the schools. We should have school boards made up entirely of parents. Parents should be running the schools, basically, because they need to be involved. And I know that puts the onus sort of back on parents, but parents, you're not exempt from the burden and the responsibility and the tremendous privilege of raising your children. You cannot be exempted from that.
Going back to something you said earlier, and I wholeheartedly agree, like they wanted to make an example of the ones that were talking, the ones that were bold enough to speak. They wanted to quickly make an example of them. This is what happens when you stand up to teachers. This is what happens when you stand up to the machine that is the public education.
We have receipts for a school board member calling, reaching out to the police and saying, I don't want this man on school property.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little tyrant and I get to dictate who comes on school property. So the guy, when he went to pick up his kid, was arrested. He wasn't allowed to see the kid play any of the baseball games. I mean, that's insane.
Yes.
And the guy, and by the way, it's not like the guy was carrying weapons or whatever. Like, he didn't do anything.
Right.
He just spoke at a school board meeting and ticked somebody off.
Yes. Yeah, and so essentially a long time ago, back when education was started, the question was always who's in charge really ultimately in the classroom. And it used to be that the parent was in charge, right? And that the responsibility of the teacher was a delegated responsibility.
That's correct.
And the teacher represents the parents in the classroom. And so at the end of the day, if there was any kind of punishment, they used to do corporal punishment back in the day.
Right.
This is back when they used to say the Pledge of Allegiance and when they used to open in prayer they would have scripture reading in class. They used to do things like that. But even with corporal punishment, it was always the parents' involvement of, we're going to notify the parents this is what's happened, right? And here's the discipline and all of that. Nowadays, everyone it's like the state is completely in charge of education, and you go over there and we'll let you know if we need you, the parent. Actually, we don't need you. And I will say this, pediatric medicine can be just as tyrannical in the way pediatrics deals with children and children's health. Yes. But when it comes to the classroom, parents are in charge. Terry McAuliffe was running for governor back in 2021, and he famously sort of said, parents have no right to determine what goes on in the classroom.
Right.
He loses the election as a result of that, but only by
not by a lot.
A very small margin. And so this has not ever been really remedied. It's just been like, we kind of limp along, But just as they're re-examining what happened on January 6th and what happened last year on July the 13th with the Secret Service,
Right.
and there's several other things that we've got to go back and look at, that needs to be re-examined, and I think there are people that need to face public accountability.
Well, certainly for this, right? But also we need to change the narrative, because the narrative that was put out is parents who get involved are domestic terrorists, right? So we need to flip that and say we need parents. We need parents to be involved in the raising of their children. We need parents to be involved in the education of their children, because children do not get as well educated without parental involvement.
Yeah.
And so we need to make parenting great again.
Yes.
We need Donald Trump to be a parent in chief and come out, and we need an executive order to recognize that this happened and this will no longer happen.
Absolutely.
And so that has to be a cultural shift that I think that the White House is perfectly situated to lead on. It doesn't require any new regulations or legislation or anything like that. It's just a recognition that parents are important. And we need to bring back the family in our culture, because we're losing the family. That is the bedrock of our culture.
100%, absolutely true. You go back to Noah Webster, he talked about the importance of education for a well-informed citizenry. That's the only way you defend the Constitution. You talk about Edmund Burke, who basically...
Well, when they talked education, they were talking Bible.
Right.
They meant the Bible.
The Bible in every home.
And that's how school started.
Yes.
The school started to teach the Bible. School started to teach morality, because the government should be responsible for training citizens in morality, because otherwise they won't obey law.
Right.
Right? And so that's the social contract. But we've lost that. We took Bible out of schools. We made school and education by way of calling education school. We made it all academic. And now it's not.
Yes.
It's not even academic. Now it's this new morality where anything goes.
Yes.
And that's the danger.
Yeah.
And that's why I do what I do, because what we have lost in the mix of this is that education happens organically. Children are naturally curious, and they will learn if you don't get in their way. But the moment that you send them into an institution, that gets in their way, because the institution says, no, Johnny, put down that thing that you're interested in. Now it's math time. You're going to learn math because that's what I say. And Johnny, put down your hand. I'm not answering your question. I'm not talking about that right now. You wait your turn. And that discourages the child from learning. And so by the end of school, the child, and most of us, right, are like, ugh, I'm so fed up with learning.
Right.
I never want to crack another book.
Yes.
I'm done with this, right? And that's sad. That shouldn't be. That's why school will never beat homeschooling.
Yes.
Liberty knows that.
Right. Yeah, okay, so, this is something Jack Brewer's reminded me of, and many others. We have over 50 million children in the K through 12 public education system. And we do recognize, like, at the end of the day, I homeschool, we homeschool as a family, our kids. We also recognizing, while that's probably best, for a lot of people, it's they don't see how they can make it work. And I'm empathetic to that. I understand that. That's why we have to get control back when it comes to public education.
Right.
Because it's a system that millions, tens and 20s and 30s of millions of people are going to go through.
For sure.
For sure.
That's why I want to bring parenting back. We
Right.
need parents in charge of schools.
That's
we need
right.
the parents to be making these decisions, because ultimately the responsibility falls on them. Every court case where a parent sued the school for not teaching the child to read, they lost.
Right.
It is not the school's responsibility to teach the child to read. What?
Yeah.
I thought that was their number one job. No, apparently not, according to the courts, right? And so the other thing that we have to come to terms with is really what's worse. Not teaching a child and letting a child just learn whatever a child decides to learn, or teaching a child lies.
Right.
Teaching a child they can change their gender. Teaching a child that it's perfectly fine to poop in the hallway because they're a cat, or what have you. Those are lies that are very difficult to unseat later.
Right.
And I look at that as child abuse.
Yes.
And so, to me, no school, no abuse, or abuse, right? So we're saying, well, school is a good default. It's not anymore. Not when they're teaching children lies. Not when
Right.
they're teaching children survival of the fittest. Right?
It's Darwinian, yeah, gone mad.
That's a Darwinian thing, and it's bullying. And then they wonder why we have a bullying problem. Well, they're teaching it in the schools.
Yes.
So, and that's child abuse also. There was a story years ago in Baltimore, 2 young girls beat up another young teenager, 13, 14, beat her to death in the school bathroom because of a boy, something. So they beat her and she died. Now that is that abuse because they learned survival of the fittest, so they're just playing out what they learned in school.
Right.
And of course they shouldn't have done that. They should have known, they should have had some kind of morality to tell them that killing somebody was wrong. The girl died, she's no better off. But the 2 girls who perpetrated the crime, they're no better off either. They've got that on their record for the rest of their lives. They've got that on their conscience. And within an hour, the superintendent of schools came out and announced to the world, our schools are safe. I know this because I was covering it on the radio at the time, and it blew me away. I'm like, well, demonstrably not.
Right.
But they just say it. And so we have this default that, well, school is okay. Like, it's not the best, but it's okay. I'm not so sure.
Right.
I think we have to start questioning that.
Of
And we have to
100%.
start turning it around.
100% right. And so, like, when you've got these mixed family situations where you've got, single parent homes, a lot of people are being raised, kids are being raised in single parent homes, even being raised in homes that are not their parents, or it's a step parent or whatever. And so there's all kinds of exposure. A child is not protected. And in many of these impoverished areas of the country, they'll send the kids to the school in order so that the kids can get supervision,
Right.
and a
food.
meal,
Yeah.
like food. If they don't go to school, they don't eat.
I'm not saying that we can extricate ourselves easily,
Oh no, yeah,
but it bothers me that the secondary argument, after we cover the fact that schools don't educate,
right,
the secondary arguments are, well, what about socialization?
right.
That's not why school was
It's
erected, right?
bogus.
And what about the meals?
Right.
And I'm like, but that's not what schools exist for.
Right.
I understand that they serve secondary and tertiary, right, services. That's not okay. When the turn of the century from 1800 to 1900, we had almost 100% literacy. And the literacy was not the literacy of today. The literacy back then was Shakespeare and Dickens. And that was fun reading for people. Okay? The literacy of today is TikTok,
Right.
right? So we are no better off for having had a century worth of schooling. We are much worse off. And we have to wrestle with that and figure out how that can be. The government took over the education of its people, and the people failed to prosper.
Right.
In fact, they are worse off today than they were.
Yes.
That's a terrible indictment of the entire system. I think we should be considering what other remedies we could consider.
100%. You go back and you look at the late 1800s, there were the college entrance exams, like right out of high school, on paper, where they would write an essay form. I mean, beautiful cursive, prose, excellent writing. They could also do calculus, and they used slide rule. They didn't have
Yes.
calculators.
No, I mean,
And
seriously.
It's insane. And so,
But
like,
look, even before that, revolutionary times, no school, but at the age of 12 or 13, a young man would go to Harvard or Yale, fluent in English, Latin, and Greek, to study divinity. Okay? That was the extent of education available to people. And those men created the United States of America.
they did, right.
So they were all homeschooled. They were all self-taught. And what I'm saying to people is, the school has trained you to think that children won't learn without an instructor. And I'm here to tell you that's a lie.
Right, 100%.
They have created a need for themselves. The educators have created a need for themselves. And we ought to be careful of that. Like, there's
Yeah.
a conflict of interest.
It's a narrative that has been foisted on us for decades. I agree, and how you started in saying, too, when we were kids, we were taught how to behave in a classroom. And so the teacher is that authority figure. And then when you graduate out of that system, the authority figure is still that teacher. and the people that run the schools. So we have been...
and then we need an authority.
Yes.
We need permission. We're constantly looking for permission. I coach people all the time who literally all they're really looking for is permission to do the thing.
Yes.
And I'm saying to them, you don't need permission. You can just do the thing.
Yeah.
Just do it, as Nike says.
Just
I mean,
do
there's a reason
the
that
thing.
resonates, is because we're all like, can I do this? Am I allowed to do this? What should I do? We developed through our schools this trust the expert mentality. And that did so well during COVID, did it not?
Right, it didn't. Absolutely. And so,
incidentally, that's what I talk about in my book.
okay, tell me
That's
about
what
that.
this is all about, is, what the schools have done to us and how to escape it for your own kids. So this is a book for parenting to teach them how to homeschool their kids. Because so many parents, this is what's really sad to me. So many parents are like, well, I can't. I'm like, you can't what? I can't homeschool. Okay, what does that mean? What do you mean by homeschool? I don't know. That's right. But you're so willing to talk about your ineptitude when you have no idea how capable you are. And the reason for that is because you went to school. And in school, for 13 years, you learned that you were incapable of doing anything that you hadn't been formally instructed in. That is debilitating. We have been debilitated by our schools. So there used to be an engine when this nation was formed, the entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
And that has been slowly bred out of us via our schooling to raise us to be workers for somebody else. So we are in our schools, we're training the employment class, not the entrepreneurial class. And so we almost fail to innovate. There are very few innovators anymore.
Right.
And that's too bad. It's easy to recapture. All you have to do, parents, is keep your kids home with you
yes.
and encourage them to learn, and then put some guardrails on so they don't go on YouTube and look up the wrong things or whatever.
That's right.
And you'll have kids that far exceed your expectations. I have 3 of them.
See, and by the way, I love what you pointed out. That's 100% right. In the modern educational system, they did shift to where you were trained to teach. You were taught to think for yourself initially in early education in America, but then later it all became about the Industrial Revolution.
Right, following the rules.
Following the rules, and then you become a cog in those machines.
And
so,
incidentally, it's also about conformity, right?
Yes.
So, and I talk about all this in my book because it's all the underpinnings. You have to look underneath. You have to go to what's really working behind the scenes. People don't understand that this is a deterrent to learning. The fact that I have to raise my hand to ask a question, draw attention to myself to ask a question. And everybody's looking at me like, why doesn't she know, or whatever. It's all a deterrent. And we just go along with it because we were raised in it. We were, as Mark Twain said, you don't see the cage that you're in because you were born into it and you were taught to love the bars.
Right.
And so that's where we are. We think, well, school, I mean, how bad can it be? We survived. It's bad. It's worse than you can think. They're teaching children pornography.
Right.
This is child abuse. So my whole mission is to get kids out of schools because you don't have any control over who is teaching your child, and you don't know who that person is.
Yeah.
Even unless you take that teacher to lunch on a weekly basis and maybe go visit her in her home, or, you don't know them. You don't know what they say. And even if you did, can I tell a quick story?
Yes. Yeah.
So my daughter is, I would say divergent is the way people would refer to her. She's an artist. She thinks thoughts that are not like other people's thoughts. She's quite bright, and she comes up with uncanny things, which always blew me away. But she did 1 year of half-day kindergarten. And when she was 16, she said to me, "Mommy, I figured out when I learned that I was stupid." And I'm like, "Say what now?" She said, "Well, it was kindergarten and we were doing sight words. And you remember the little smart boy?" And I said, "Yeah, Steven?" She said, "Yeah." So he read first and he got it perfect. And I was going to go up there and get it perfect, but I got a little stage fright. And so I didn't do it perfectly. And the class laughed. And that's when I decided that I must be the stupid one. Because in a class of kids, everybody has a role to play.
Wow.
There's the class clown.
Yeah.
There's the dumb one. There's the silly one. There's the messy one. Like the smart one. And so she just self-assigned stupid. That's bad enough. But for 10 years, I was homeschooling her, telling her how bright she was. She thought I was lying to her.
Wow.
Because I had no idea. And I can tell you the scenario, like I went to pick her up that day probably, and the lovely little kindergarten teacher who had just graduated teaching college, which is really behavior management school, right? Said to me, oh, it was so cute. Tavy tried to read her sight words, but she didn't do it right, and so it was funny. You know, having no knowledge of what my daughter just pulled in.
What she's internalizing. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And for 10 years.
Wow.
Had that, and you know, little girls are prone to feeling inadequate and all that stuff.
100%, yep.
So I'm just saying, you know, you'll make the mistakes as the parent, but you'll be there to understand how that might have not been the best thing and rectify it faster than 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
That would be the hope, right?
I am 100,000% sold on homeschooling. Like, I am totally sold on it. I wholeheartily agree with you. I've got 4 kids. I've got a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 7-year-old, and then a 6-month-old. And you know, they will internalize things that happened at 5, 6, and 7, and
Yes.
they remember it.
Okay.
And we'll forget that, you know, I
Right.
might have forgotten the car ride where I said something and they didn't like what I said, but it hurt them, you
Yes.
know, and I don't carry that at all.
No, it
you
was
know?
a nothing burger to you.
Yes.
But to them, look, they're experiencing, kids are experiencing everything for the first time.
Yeah.
And even the second time is still the first time for them because they don't have any frame of reference. And we forget that as we age, when we get to be adults, everything is immediately sorted. We
Yes.
immediately sort it into, well, that's this part, that's this. It's all got a frame of reference because we have this body of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But kids don't have that.
Right.
And so, you know, when parents say, how many times do I have to tell you to what? I'm like, yeah, you have to tell them 100 times because it's all new to them. Every single time it's new.
That's
you
right.
know?
Well, Sam, thank you so much for your work. You are doing the Lord's work. I think it's very important people understand that education does come at a cost.
That God doesn't ordain schools.
And then God doesn't ordain schools. But education comes at that cost of freedom and that cost
Yeah.
of surrendering your children
Yeah.
to Caesar. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, government shouldn't be raising our children. It is our responsibility. And by the way, God, it doesn't matter what the government says. God doesn't see it that way. And we have to remember that, right?
Well, I mean, the Bible's very clear.
Yes.
He says, these are my words, teach them to your children. Teach them diligently when you walk by the by, when you wake in the morning, when you lie down to sleep, right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm misquoting, but
Deuteronomy 6, Joshua chapter 1,
Right.
like all of those things, right?
Right.
Don't let the word of God depart from your
and
mind
here's what's
and your mouth.
interesting, because we can go here. When you teach your children the Bible, everything else falls into place. All the academics fall into place.
It does.
You almost don't need to do the academics. I'm trying to make this super simple for people. We've been sold that it's all academic, and it's not. Because children are differently gifted. And so if you give children God, then they understand God created everything. Then they want to know everything because you develop in them a thirst for God.
Yes.
And the academics will follow. They will simply follow organically on the heels of that because they have a thirst for knowledge. And God created all, right? But if you try to force the knowledge on them, then they'll be struggling, right? Because it might not be that gifting that they have to do the math that way or to do the English language that way or whatever. And so, you know, we're really doing our children a disservice in the pedagogy that we pursue now. Well,
Yeah.
especially now since none of it's academic anyway.
Right.
It's kind of scary.
Amen. I do believe that wholeheartedly, that it really is about giving them a hunger for God, to
Yes.
desire the Lord, to
Yes.
understand Him, to know Him, and the universe and the world in which He's created.
That's right.
Everything flows from Him.
That's right.
And if you look at the greatest people of history in terms of, you know, Shakespeare and Sir Thomas Watts and Isaac Newton, and you go down the litany of all the great innovators and inventors and writers and artists, all of them, most all of them, were not humanists. They attributed...
Even Darwin was not a humanist.
Isn't that interesting?
Darwin even said, without the missing link, none of this could be true. It's in his book.
Right.
He disavowed his own sort of theory. He just brought it to market sooner than the other guy because he wanted the accolades.
Yes.
Sadly.
And so the whole that black box, if you will, or that missing link, that it's so critical. At the end of the day, it really is. It does come down to our knowledge of God. We can't know ourselves without knowing Him.
Amen.
Amen. Hey, did you find this helpful? I hope you did. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend, and also go to standingforfreedom.com where you can find more content, articles, podcasts, and our Theology of Politics series, all at standingforfreedom.com.